All right, good morning. This is the fourth lecture on the skeletal system. And again, it's going with the Hole's Essentials of Human Anatomy and Physiology textbook. Today we're going to go over the pectoral girdle, which is basically the shoulder. So how the upper limb attaches to the axial skeleton. So the pectoral girdle, it makes an incomplete ring, and this is to allow for more movement. It supports the upper limb, and then it's also the attachment site for all of the muscles that move those two upper limbs. The pectoral girdle is made of just two bones. There's left and right side. So there's two scapulae, the E on the end means it's plural, and there's two clavicles. So these are commonly called your shoulder blade and your collarbone. And you could actually kind of see these if you, look in a mirror at your back and kind of wiggle your shoulders a bit. You can see, quote unquote, your angel wings. If you've heard people call it that, you can see your scapula. And if you kind of like tilt your shoulder in towards your chin and look down, you can see your collarbone, your clavicle there. So the clavicles are kind of an S-shaped bone. They're elongated, and they actually start anteriorly, and then run to the posterior. So they start in your front. It's located just below your neck, and the clavicle articulates with your sternum, and then it runs to your posterior and articulates with your scapula. And the collarbones are attachment site for muscles that move your upper limbs, which is the scientific word for arms, and your chest and your back. It's also relatively easily broken too. It's a common injury. Sometimes it happens during difficult births. Young babies have their clavicles get broken as a part of that process, or injuries from, say, like falling off of horses or ATVs or car accidents, things like that. It's fairly easy to break. So here's a picture of the clavicle and the scapula and the pectoral girdle. So on the right hand side over here, this is a radiograph, and then on the left hand side is a more stylized drawing. But here's the clavicle, and you can see this is your front, and this is towards the back. The scapula has this kind of a funky shape. It has this curve here and another curve here. And then the clavicle will the scapula articulates with the humerus. The clavicle articulates with the scapula up here. It makes a joint. So your shoulder blades and your scapulae, these are triangular shaped bones. They're broad, and it's found, one on each side in your upper back. The spine is in between the scapulae, Your spinal column is in between your two scapulae. On the scapula itself, it has various parts. I'm going to move forward so you can see the parts before we start talking about them. So here is your scapula. This is kind of, if you're looking at it from a side view. So you have your glenoid cavity. This is where the humerus will articulate. You have your coracoid process, okay, that comes round. This is in the front for the humerus. And then the acromion process here, which is where the clavicle articulates. This is posterior, this is anterior. Okay, and this is from a front-on view. If you could see it here, this is a nice socket for the ball of the humerus to articulate with. And then here from behind, this raised ridge, this is called the spine of the scapula, which is different than your spinal column. Okay, and it divides the scapula into two parts, but they are not equally divided. Yes, I said all of those things already. Okay, so the upper limb is technically what we call your arm in common speech, but that's not actually correct. Your upper limb is the whole arm, and then scientifically, then you have upper arm is, where you're right next to your shoulder, and then you have your forearm, which is, connected to your hand. So the bones of the upper limb, they make up the whole arm, forearm, and hand, and they're sites for muscle attachment, for movement. A lot of people don't think about it, but these muscles actually get a lot of use, can get sore, and they do need, massages and stretching just like all of your other muscles, especially if you're doing a lot of using your cell phone, playing video games, working on the computer. These muscles get a whole lot of exercise, but just in one way, so they can be prone to repetitive use injuries. But the bones of the upper limb, in order from proximal to distal, are listed here. So you have one humerus, that's in your arm. Then your radius and ulna are in your forearm. Then you have your carpals, those are in your wrist. Metacarpals are found in the palm of your hand, and then your phalanges are found in your fingers. So the humerus, it's a long bone, and it extends from the scapula at the shoulder down to the elbow, and it's the only bone in your upper arm. Sometimes it's called the funny bone because the name of it is humerus. It articulates with the scapula at the head proximally, and then distally it will articulate with the radius and also with the ulna at the capitulum and the trochlea. And then it has some other features too. We're not going to need to get that in depth into the features for your exams. But you can see here is the head. This articulates with the scapula. And then you have the neck here, and then the shaft, the diaphysis here. And then at the distal epiphysis, you can see this is the trochlea. This is a nice groove that makes a hinge joint with your radius and your ulna here. So the radius and ulna, these are the two bones of the forearm. So if a person is standing in anatomical position, palms up, then the thumb actually radiates outward laterally, and that's the side that the radius is on. So if you think the thumb radiates, then that's the same side as the radius. So the radius is lateral to the ulna. It has a disc-like head, and it's going to articulate with the humerus on one end, and it also makes a pivot joint with the ulna. And this allows you to supinate and pronate your arms. You can flip your palm, up and down, which is a very unique movement. It's a special movement. The ulna is, it also articulates with the humerus and then the radius as well. And here you have a picture. This is the trochlear notch. It articulates with the humerus. This is a matching shape to make that hinge joint that's found there in the elbow. Okay, and then the head of the radius articulates here with the ulna, and this part kind of slides around this way and pivots. Okay, make that pivot joint. Right, within the hand consists of your wrist, palm, and fingers. We humans have 8 different carpal bones. We're just going to call them the carpals or the carpal bones. They do have individual names. You do not need to know them for your exam, although we may practice with a few of them. But they're arranged in 2 groups of 4. If you ever heard of carpal tunnel syndrome, that's because you have tendons and nerves and blood vessels that run in between the carpal bones. And when you do a lot of typing or a lot of work with your hands, it can even be like sewing or knitting. If you do a whole lot of work without relief or rest, then those muscles and tendons and things within the carpal tunnel can swell up. But because there's nowhere for the swelling to go, it produces pain. So they just need rest. You can also wear an athletic brace around your wrist to help support it while you're healing up. So in the palm of the hand itself, you have 5 metacarpal bones. They're labeled metacarpal 1 through metacarpal 5. The thumb is number 1, and then they're just numbered in order until you get to the pinky. And then each finger has 3 phalanges, and they're also labeled 1 through 5, starting with the thumb and ending with the pinky. And then, so the phalanges at the tip of your fingers are called your distal phalange, and the ones closer to the palm is your proximal phalange, and the one in the middle is the medial phalange, or middle phalange. Except for your thumb. Your thumb is unique. Your thumb has only 2 phalanges. And here's a picture. So you could see right here, here are your 8 carpal bones. Here are their names if you're interested. If you look into, if you know anything about human and primate evolution, there are scientists who specialize in just one particular bone of the carpals, and they study how that's changed throughout primate evolution. Our trapezium here is quite unique because of how it articulates with the thumb. This is a very unique joint. It's called a saddle joint. We'll come back to that at the end. That our opposable thumb is unique to humans. Here are your metacarpals. You can actually feel them. If you feel into the palm of your hand, you can feel there's some kind of space between them. And your phalanges here. So, and you can tell if you bend your thumb, you can see you only have 1 knuckle on your thumb, so you can see where the distal and the proximal phalange are. But if you bend any of your other fingers, you can see you have 2 knuckles there. Okay, and that is the end of lecture 4.